Well, hello there. I don't see anybody in the chat, but I'm just going to carry on. I miss everybody, so I just thought I'd do a quick live stream today and kind of catch people up on what's happening. It's just super sunny, and the days are so beautiful that Dr. Judy has been out in the garden, and so I've just kind of gone with that and said, go for it, because I think it's a great thing to be out in the garden and to be out with the chickens. And when you got beautiful days, it's important to enjoy your life. And so on a Saturday afternoon or early evening, in her case, I just felt like it was a good thing to ask if this is going to work for her on a Saturday, every Saturday. So we're going to see how that goes, but not today. And last weekend was kind of we kind of missed each other. We missed paths. So I just thought that I'd come on and say hi to the folks that have been so great about coming on a Saturday, because I want you to know that we haven't forgotten about you. We have in no way given up on doing PSYOP recovery program, but I think what we'll do is keep it a little bit looser for the summer. Now, I know it's only May, but just to get you in touch with what's happening, she's got projects that she's doing, including outdoor work at her place. And I'm doing a pretty intensive couple of courses for about, well, another 5 weeks. It was 7 weeks altogether. And I just finished doing I'm doing a degree very, very slowly, but I'm working on that. And so this is, as you probably know, not my main work. And although I would love it to be, I do a lot of other media related stuff, but I am going to school, and I'm trying to keep my ear to the ground and really trying to synthesize. That's the word I'm looking for. I'm trying to synthesize everything that I'm listening to and that I'm hearing about what's happening in the world into some sort of cohesive package, because I think it's really important, rather than looking at one aspect of what's happening in the alternative media, to kind of evaluate what's happening and synthesize it for those that don't have a lot of time to spend on the internet checking things out, and you don't want to be on mainstream media. So what I have been doing is just sort of watching a lot of different shows, and one of the things I've been doing for a long time is following George Webb. It's really hard to jump in the middle of George Webb, but I have to say that the guy is amazing. He comes on every day, whether you like what he says, whether you agree with him, whether you think he has ties to Mossad or whatever. Think what you will of the person, but he has some amazing information, and it just keeps coming along. So I think he has just a lot of sources that he puts together, and I like that. I like the way that he does his journalism, particularly the fact that he's on location right now. He's in Washington, D.C., and he's doing his reports from Capitol Hill. So some of you may have heard, if you're following the Q saga, that there's been a bit of a fallout. I've looked at all of the different sides of this, and my feeling is this: I think it's great that people are seeing it for what it is and can be. The idea that for people that just have no idea what's going on in the world, that they think everything is exactly as it seems. I think the fact that they've tuned into Q is amazing. It's absolutely great. So that part is a definite positive. I think when it starts to get into a lot of confusion, which usually is what happens, and we all know where confusion comes from. At least I think I do, because I know that my God is not a God of confusion, but of peace and order. So whenever I see confusion, I just say, well, it's got to be coming from the liar. And so in a search for truth, we can often look at lies and confusion and say, well, let's not go down that path. Let's just turn a little bit and change course. And I think that's a really important way to look at it, rather than this person is bad or this person's good. I really have a hard time with that. So I was uh, traveling with a friend, and we went by a place. She has a friend who's divorced, and gosh, don't we all? And some of us have had our own personal experiences with that. But my feeling is that it's really important not to discuss things where other people aren't in the room. And now, granted, I am talking about somebody in this situation who's not in the room, so you could very well say and be right about it that I'm out of order. I think my rule is that, first of all, if we're just using it for an example, then, it's fair as long as we're not identifying or denigrating, or we're doing it for a purpose that is trying to illustrate rather than denigrate. So this is just for illustrative purposes, and I'm saying, look, I've done talking in the room about other people lots, but I guess the thing too is beyond that, good to be able to chat about it, but then what are you gonna what are you gonna do from there? Are you gonna actually discuss it with the people that you're concerned about, the people that you're having problems with? What's the solution? So it's got to be a solution-oriented approach as far as I'm concerned. So this is what I'm thinking here. So in that case, they went by the apartment and they said, hi, so-and-so's wife, and yada yada. And I sort of knew what road we were going to go down because they were kind of pretending to say hi as we went by this person's apartment. And they started to say, that she wasn't a nice person, that, there's this and that. And I said, I just don't really want to get into that because that I don't know anything about it. Well, you really don't know because she's not a nice person. And I said, yeah, that's exactly why I don't want to get into it, because I don't know her. I know one side, but I don't know the other side. Well, she tricked him into getting married. Dr. Judy and I were talking about this, not this particular situation, but this subject. And I did tell her about this. So I'm bringing her into the conversation, and I don't think she would mind, because we agree on this idea of the fact that there's no white hats and black hats. And that's sort of where I was going with this, that we all have the potential to be villains, and we all have the potential to be saints, and everything in between. And we have great intentions sometimes that we don't live up to. So my sense is, if we follow the golden rule, then that's the deal. Now, the golden rule is really interesting because we say, well, do unto others as you'd have them do unto us. Well, that is often sort of taken as this thing of, so that people can do things my way. But I think the thing is that it's a matter of putting ourselves out there and saying, this is what I believe in, this is what I stand for, this is my belief system, this is my character. And that's why this is called character driven, because it's about character. It's about what do we stand for as individuals, and then we're willing to be caught out on that. We're willing to be called on it if we don't live up to those standards. Now, I got a lot of kids, and they definitely have called me out on a lot of different occasions. And, I'm being called out a lot, especially as I get older. And yeah, the farther away that you get from the parenting and into your own life, the more likely you are to actually kind of loosen the regs a little bit. So anyway, the point is that if I've said something, then it's okay for somebody to say to me, look, I thought that you didn't like talking about people who aren't in the room. And I have to be accountable for that. I've got to be able to say, yeah, you're right. I really shouldn't be doing this. On the other hand, I might say, I'm just trying to work this through and I want to talk to them. So I'm just trying to get some wisdom on this. I'm trying to, and then if the other person wants to help you, great. But let them off the hook if they don't want to. Another deal, don't start discussions in cars. It's kind of a trap for people that are driving in particular, because they don't really have a choice to participate. One of the first things that I was told in a counseling session was the first question that you ask is this a good time? And that's a really good question, because often we start things and the person's tired or they're distracted or they're doing something where they just don't want to talk about that subject at that moment. And driving in the car is one of those situations for me where I find it very hard to, well, for one thing, you're concentrating on other things, but if you don't want to get into something that's heavy, then driving in a car is not a good situation because people feel trapped a little bit. At least I do. Maybe I'm a bit claustrophobic or something, but I find that a really difficult situation to navigate. Haha, a little bit of piloting humor there. So, anyway, that was the situation, and it was quite interesting because it turned into, well, you've done this and you've done that. Right. Okay, that's exactly my point, is that there is no sort of right and wrong. There's this standard that we can apply in our own lives, and we can try our best to live up to it and try our best to create that kind of peace in the world that we want to have around us. If it's okay to have these kind of arguments going on all the time, then that's your thing and that's okay. You'll probably surround yourself with people that want to do that. For me, I just don't want to do that anymore. Maybe I did it sometime in my life. Maybe the drama was interesting, but it's not interesting anymore. So this is my way of kind of introducing the whole Q thing as well, because I've been hearing a lot of going back and forth, and it becomes this dividing line. And now people have their stakes in the ground and they're saying, well, I'm going to stick by him anyway. And it really helps you to see where people are coming from in terms of their stance and their sense that they're really being, having integrity by sticking through something that is really not necessary. Because frankly, if you have your own way of being able to investigate, then you can find out everything that Q's been talking about. So it's great for the newcomers, the beginners, the people who are just starting out in the world of the red pill. But it's really not necessary to be talking about, what Trump's next move is, or follow. This is the thing that I really don't like, where we go one, we go all. I think that can tend to be a little bit of a trap, and it can be a collection agency. So this is what we've been talking about on the show actually, I don't have the PSYOP recovery show up today, but on the PSYOP recovery program on Saturdays, and we've been doing this over the past few years, just talking about some of the PSYOPs that are out there that can become limited hangouts, they can become collection agencies, and it's really important to watch for the signs. And when you see somebody being intractable, where they just go, okay, well, I've heard that, it's that the Q thing's been compromised, but I'm going to continue on anyway, or whatever it is that they're saying. You have to really watch for that as much as for the message itself. So I actually unsubscribed to a couple of people, and not people who were into Q necessarily, but it was the fact that they were so desperate to say that they're going to continue on down that road and these are the reasons. Fine. That's fine, but it's not necessary to get everybody coming along with you. Where we go one, we go all. And that's right there is the problem. Where we go one, we go all. There are lots of things that I disagree with people about, but we can still be friends. And I think that's the kind of world we live in right now, where if we don't agree with each other, then we start this campaign to denigrate them or to build ourselves up. And you can really see this dichotomy that's growing, and it's all meant to divide us. And I think it's really important to be aware of it, if nothing else, just to be aware. And that's why I'm checking in today, because I want people to know that I really care about this community. I don't care about the size. I don't care about anything other than the fact that people recognize that this is an important thing. It's an important thing for me. It's an important thing for Dr. Judy and any other guests that I've had on. we all really believe in what we're doing, even though we have other things in our lives. And even if it's gardening, these are really important things. And again, it's not about the money, it's not about being demonetized or shadow banned or anything. There's other things that I'd like to talk about with people too, besides so-called controversial things. I don't see how they're that controversial, but apparently Dr. Judy is a very controversial person. Well, the concept of Dr. Judy is what I'm trying to say. It's not the person herself, and that's what I love about the fact that she comes on and she talks about her chickens and she talks about her life, because that's the person. The fact that we as people have things happen to us and we write a book or we write a play or we broadcast or whatever it is that we choose to do to share it with other people is not who we are. That is something that we've done out of the depth of our being, I suppose, because anybody that writes, whether it's Stephen King or whether it's Dr. Judy or me or anybody, what we're doing is expressing something that needs to come to the surface. And I think that's why I'm on today, just to let you know that there are things that I like to just come and talk to you about. I'm here by myself doing this, so it's kind of tricky sometimes when I'm going from screen to screen, but I wanted to just have a little bit more of a personal conversation with you today. And I started off talking about George Webb and how I've been watching what he's been doing over the months and years. And literally, he's been doing this since now, I think, 2016. He started in October of 2016. So we can really say, I think we can say years. Every day he does installments. He starts early in the morning and he goes right through. Now, what I like about him too is that he's not a limited hangout. He doesn't have people that are glomming on. In fact, a lot of people question him. He gets a lot of hassle from people. He gets a lot of blowback, but he's not vindictive. He's had problems with one certain person that I've had problems too with, and I have to say that's one of the reasons that I had problems with my channel, is the same person that he's having a problem with. And so I don't want to get into it, because then you sort of lower yourself to the same kind of back and forth, and life's too short. Not interested. I got grass to cut. What can I say? I live on the West Coast, so it's a beautiful day here, and I love being in my Airstream, and I like to have a chance to talk to you and update things. But there's always the outside. Basically you can say I live on the water, but it's only the courtesy. Okay, I'm going to tell you this. I have a friend who is now 80 years old. She was my grade 6 teacher. We were raising animals in the classroom. We raised a baby ape, and she is a writer, and she wrote A Seal in My Sleeping Bag, Raccoon in My Parka, Love Affair with a Cougar. She was very well known in the 70s. In particular, she was asked, she made it onto the Jimmy Kimmel show last year, but not as her, but her book, Love Affair with the Cougar, because he made a joke about, who's the cougar, because there's a picture of her and a picture of a cougar. Anyway, her name's Lynn Hancock, and I want to give her a plug here because she's got some really great books, and if you're ever interested, go over to lynnhancock.com, find out more about her. Anyway, I live on her property, and she kindly lets me have my Airstream on her property. It's kind of hard to find places where you can put your Airstream, and that's where I broadcast from. And I have a little place here, and I help her with various things. And she just came back from a trip to Cairo, and she got hit by a pedicab. I'm going to call it a pedicab. I think, as she describes it, that's what it was, in one of the markets there. And she came back and she had an injury. So that's a lot of what I've been doing, is trying to help her and get through my classes and doing this. But I really do love doing this. So that's a really long introduction. I was just meaning to spend 5 minutes talking to you about that. Anyway, So I'm going to have to turn my head a little bit when I do a couple of these things. But what I want to do is show you what George is up to, in case you're not watching him. And this is not a plug for any particular channel. It's just that I think it's important to get a variety of different ideas about. Oh dear, just a sec. Things coming up on the screen. I need to turn things off before I do the show. So my point about George is I interviewed him last year, and we sort of had a little bit of a back and forth, and I was able to kind of get a sense of what he was doing. It was before he was really getting traction. I think I started following him probably in January or February of 2017. And then in May, I had him on my show and we chatted, and then I had him on again when he was doing something else. Regardless, I got a chance to sort of see what he was up to in the background. And George is a fully rounded person, and he's highly intelligent, and he's able to process things in a way that very few people can. And I'm fascinated with those kind of people, because I would say that anybody who's making a difference in the world is probably going to be seen as being different in their own way. I think Dr. Judy is incredibly deep in terms of the way that she sees things. And yet sometimes she can come across as being, so simple in the way that she explains things. She likes to look at things like nature and see how it works and how we all fit together. And that's why she was able to see things that she was able to see on 9/11. The same with George. The things that have happened in his life have allowed him to see the world in a particular way. All of us have these unique gifts in the way that we can see the world. And he's one of those people that just keeps going and going and going. And when you see the news, like what I've got up here on the screen, there's various names that come up that he's been talking about over the months. So again, it's this idea that Q holds all of the information. Well, George was talking about some of the stuff that Q brought up in advance, and he was fairly humble about not getting into it too much. But there was a point where they were talking about the uranium and the fact that Syria was taking the uranium and processing it, where he kind of got off the boat a little bit, and he said, look, if that's what Q's saying, then I have to get off the boat. And he explained why. Then he came back and he said, okay, somebody explained to me that that's not what's happening. So he kind of takes the feedback, and then he does the research, and he says, what I found is that I was a little bit off in what I thought he was saying. And so I just thought it was fascinating to watch that whole process. So I'm going to play this little piece for you. You could easily find it yourself, but I'm going to play it for you here. Let's see if I can find it. I'm going to put this up on the screen. Oh, George is upside down. I'm going to put George up, right side up. Okay, I'm going to make a bit of noise here. Sorry. Scrape, scrape. Okay. Should have figured that out ahead of time. But anyway, I'm going to do a little bit of finagling here. Okay, so let's just play a little George, and you'll see what I think you'll see what I mean. You'll get the idea. Do that. Okay, here goes George. Let's see if we can hear him.
Okay, it's day 205, and we're probably a little bit happy, a little bit celebratory here. It's not a competition. It's not a competition, but we might have nosed out Q. Q with all his mighty research network, and maybe we had a little bit of a jump on Q because we got started earlier about a year and a half ago, and that's why maybe we had a little bit more of a base. But I do believe, and if gun your engine if you're a drug dealer for rum. I do believe that our advantage over the Q folks, and it really wasn't a competition. I think it was more about one hand washing the other in cooperation. So I'm not here celebrating and say, hey, it's me. But there was a couple of people who, hello, hey, Biloxi. Oh, Biloxi Blues, Biloxi Blues. Biloxi is the training center of the Army, right? Yeah, Biloxi Blues, isn't that right? I think my relative had a relative do basic training in Biloxi with the Air Force. But anyway, Boston's here. Thank you, Boston. So so I don't think I'm not trying to make this a competition or anything like that. Uh, but tax force is texting me right now. But what happened was task force said to me, "Hey, you saw those Jack Lew payments, right? U.S. Treasury payments for the Iran deal, right? Of how they got the 1.7 billion out of the country, right?" And I'm like, "No, I never saw that." Oh boy, I think somebody's trying to beat us to the punch on Twitter. And as soon as she said that, that's it. That's the Awans. That's the suspicious activity reports. That's the Awans. That's it. There was some bar that they had to keep it below, that Hillary and the gang had to keep it below to move the money out of the country. And the FBI has something called FinCEN. Thomas Paine's talked about this a lot, which is just basically a way of seeing a big bunch of cash going through the wire. It's like an elephant going through a snake, you know? It's pretty obvious, like, oh, they're laundering money, you know? That's how obvious it is. And then there's the SWIFT network, which is this international funds transfer network, which I actually worked on when I was at Burroughs a long, long time ago, that's still being used. If you monitor the major financial transaction networks like SWIFT and other places for money laundering, you see these large cash transfers. And as soon as she told me the amount, I said, "That's it. That's the Awans. That's a suspicious activity report." Oh my gosh, she's sending me all this stuff and I can't look at it just yet. Task force, come downstairs. Tell me directly while I'm live here. Don't tweet me. Come on downstairs. We had a long day. We walked from Colorado all the way back here to Capitol Heights, Maryland. So I think somebody mapped that. I think we had about 12. They got to kill us now, man. We nailed it today. Task force nailed it. She figured it out. I mean, she nailed it. You have to move the money some way, and you have to move it in increments that you can say, if you're FBI, oh, there's a suspicious activity report. We'll write that up at $999,000, $1 million. This is exactly the same way Mena Airport worked, by the way. They had the Arkansas Development Finance Authority. They had the average daily balance was 100 million, and they were able to move the money every day and zero out the balance every day. That was Rob Rubin at Treasury, and then it wasn't Jack Lew. This is the same exact deal, only using the Congress and the Congressional Federal Credit Union. Did they also use the Navy Federal Credit Union? I don't know. But, and this is where it's so easy. If you're on the FBI side and you actually have FinCEN, it's FINCEN. If you have FinCEN and you can see these transactions, it's easy. You go, hey, Jack Lew, why are you moving 1,700 $1 million transactions? That's a lot of money, Jack. It's a lot of money to be moving out of the Congress. You buying a lot of houses for your friends, Jack? Did you hit the lottery, Jack? Did you hit the $1.7 billion lottery, Jack? Jack, how are you moving that much money? And I'm figuring that was just part of the money they moved. If you figure just the Virginia operation for Operation Cassandra, and all these things are broken up to confuse you, right? But if you just look at the Virginia operation, was 1.7 billion. 200 million a month. 200 million a month, and you had at least 5 or 6 states that were working like that. You had probably New Jersey. I'm going to say Delaware. I'm going to say New York was working that type of number. Florida was working that type of number. South Carolina for certain. North Carolina was working that number. California was definitely working that number. Oregon was definitely working that number. Washington was working that number. And also Texas. That's about $1.5 billion a month. They had to have the Awans firing off every day. They had to have the Awans firing $5-10 million off every day to clear that much money. That's the problem here. Again, once you clear it to Iran, Now I got it into a bank account in Iran, or it could be Nadra Bank before they closed Nadra Bank. I said this early on. Natalia
Okay.
Sova
I
was the
just
money
wanted
rinse.
to
Natalia Sova
kind
was
of
always the
get you
money rinse.
going there. It's a
Was
bit
that
longer than I had thought,
a code name for
and I'm just
Debbie
going to leave
Wasserman Schultz?
George
We
up
don't know.
there
We don't know.
chatting away. That is, I think it's from yesterday. And I guess the thing is that I wanted to get across here is that if you listen to all the information he's got in there, it's crazy. There's so many details, and this is just from him going along and working this information through. He's just working it and working it every day. As you can see, like day 205. Well, this is not just day 205 because he started again. He was doing the. He started off with Eric Braverman, sorry, and he went on to the Awan brothers, and now he's working on the Iranian situation. And it's really fascinating because it's not just him talking at the camera all the time. Sometimes he does a synopsis and he shows you exactly how he's working this out. And it's really fascinating. And so the point is here that he's been working on this whole thing. And if you're Q watchers, then he's been ahead of the curve every time. It's really hard to keep track of things. It's really hard to follow the evidence. It's really hard to go back and sort of refresh your mind and kind of figure out what's going on. But I think this is the only way that we're going to have a breakthrough. This is the only way. We're going to have citizen journalists that actually go and take a look at the information for themselves and don't follow the pack. And I know that you guys are those kind of people. I think that Where Did the Towers Go is just an excellent resource for being able to do this kind of work because you're having to go through all the details. And you'll notice that if you hear comments about Dr. Judy on some of the videos that are put up, it'll be about her. Well, I didn't understand this and the way that she said that, and she uses these words like the Cheetos and the toasted cars and the dustification. And it's funny because if you called it MRX 53 as a phenomenon, then of course you're a genius, you're a scientist, and you're amazing. But because she calls it dustification, or, because these are phenomenon that you don't understand, you actually use placeholders for them. So George has kind of done that too, in the sense that I just see them as being sort of similar minds in the sense that they really dig in and they don't accept anything except that can be proven. And in the case of George, he really will go back and say, look, I've had to rethink this, but I was right about this. I had the basic idea, but I just needed to kind of rejig things. And as he said, it's not really about being right, but he's not afraid to say that he was on the right path or that he was on the wrong path. And that kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier with the way that we discuss things, when we're in the car with our friend and something happens, we go by somewhere and we go, oh, that's so and so's place, and we start talking about the person. That's the lowest form of conversation. It's, anybody can talk about other people. And I've noticed this because I used to go for a walk all the time along this esplanade where there were just so many people like coupled up, girlfriends, whatever. I guess people that were on their lunch hours, people that were meeting for the first time, school kids, whatever. And what I noticed as I was going by is that 90% of the conversations were about somebody else. She was doing this, he was doing that, then they did this, then they did that. And you just catch little snippets as you're going by. And I'm very auditory. So I just started to hear it as like one big conversation where people were talking about each other. And I just thought about the fact that we could be really discussing things that are higher level. The higher level of conversation is where we're running things by each other and we're sort of testing out ideas, and we're looking at things in a way that might not be natural for us. So that's why I watch some of these things, even though I don't really get it. Like sometimes I'm just totally lost when I watch George, because if I miss a couple of days, it's hard. Now, this is really interesting, I think. Anecdotally, I was at my brother's house for Christmas, and I hadn't seen either of my two brothers. I really value these times because my sister died and my mom and dad are no longer around. And I was really looking forward to being able to see my brothers. And so I went to this dinner, and it was very informal. It was around Christmas time. So it wasn't Christmas dinner, it was after Christmas, but we got together during the season. And okay, so one of my kids was there. I won't identify who it was. It doesn't really matter anyway. It's not about that. It's about the fact that I was talking to my brother about George Webb, and talking about the QAnon phenomenon, and Dr. Judy, because he's actually sort of lurked sometimes. He's been in the background. If you've seen the Frank Zappa picture when we've been having conversation, he's not Frank Zappa, but he is an admirer. So that was his picture, his placeholder. What do you call it? Avatar. And so he and I are interested in these things. So, we get together and it's like, we start talking about that, and it can feel like you're sort of blocking other people out, I suppose. And the criticism I got from my son was, oh, you're always talking about, what the guests on your show or what. And I thought, well, the reason I have the guests on my show is because I'm really interested in what they have to say. And my brother was too, so I think that it just sort of naturally happens while everybody else is sort of chit-chatting and catching up with each other, which is totally valid as well. No problem there. And of course, he's getting married, so he was talking about that stuff and his work and all that stuff. But it's really interesting that when we start getting into something that is meaty, that's a little bit more challenging, I suppose, in the sense that people are not feeling like they're part of the conversation, I guess, they start getting kind of defensive. And, to his credit, I think that I probably should have been aware. And, there was only he and his girlfriend and my other brother and his wife, and my brother, who didn't have a partner there, and I didn't have a partner there. So we were chatting with each other. So if you get the scene, anyway, I'm still living with the fallout of that, because we were talking about something, we got so engrossed in it, and a lot of it had to do with George Webb, and we were kind of comparing notes. And anyway, if you can find people that you can chat with about these things, it's a much higher level of conversation, and you're going to be able to resolve some of the things that are questions in your mind as you dig in a little bit. And it's the same thing as where do the towers go? It's a really difficult thing sometimes to go from the beginning of that book right through to the end. All I can do is to encourage you to do that, to get your own copy, to go onto the website, to really dig in. And if you're having a hard time understanding something, to ask questions, ask questions here, bring them to the table. But one of the things I do love about the book is that it's very visual and it's very easy to understand. And things will make you go, I did not know that. Like when you come to the, people can talk about how Tower 7 fell. As Dr. Judy says, it disappeared. It was no longer there. So I find it really interesting how many people that are on the Q thing are the ones that really think that they have the inside scoop with Tower 7. Well, again, I feel like they haven't really gone far enough down the path of critical thinking to go, even these 17 years later, it wasn't just Tower 7. It was all of the towers disappeared. And they disappeared. No explosions. They're still talking about how there was explosions and how they cleared everything out. And they have, and all. That was one of the posts I saw when I went to one of the sites. It's like, oh yeah, well they took everything out of the buildings. Do you know how long it would take to get everything out of a 110-story building? Even a 30-story building or a four. Have you ever moved? I mean, have you ever tried to move stuff out of your garage? I'm trying to move, I have a place where I have my Airstream. I'm trying to move things in here, and it's like, that would take me a day. So it doesn't, these things make no sense. And it's so frustrating because it feels like people just have not got their thinking caps on, and they want to just go back and forth and talk about somebody's personality, somebody's who's right, who's wrong, and that's what it begins with the conversations that we have with people in cars and what we're willing to tolerate. And I noticed that there's even an anger when we're not willing to go there. Well, you're not so great. You do this too. And there becomes this ad hominem thing just in the very fact that you're trying to shut down a conversation that will go nowhere. And it has nothing to do with me. It's somebody's ex-wife. Who's right? Who's wrong? And I just refuse to get into that. So you'll notice that as you get more into this kind of thinking, and I have to give Dr. Judy absolute full credit for this. I'm a critical thinker by nature, and I really enjoy this kind of thought, and so does my brother. And I would say that I was raised in a family where we used to have these kind of discussions, and I was the youngest, so I was usually the quiet one, believe it or not. And it's all come out later in life. And I would listen to what other people were saying, and I would hear how things would go back and forth. But nobody ever left screaming and yelling and stomping around and telling each other how stupid they were. In fact, usually we said, well, okay, let's talk about this next time and see if you've changed your mind, or if you've taken in, remember to read this or remember to watch this, and then we'll talk about it again. And that's totally valid. We don't have to all agree, but it's how we disagree. It's even the things that we find important enough to talk about. And I find this important enough to come back and talk about. I'm not going to be here necessarily every Saturday at 1:00 my time, Pacific. But I absolutely love the conversation, and I would love to have you guys being able to talk with me, back and forth. And I am going to have a chance for you to call in. I'm using a program called Zoom. I don't use Skype because they've changed things so much, and I'm just frustrated. And again, Dr. Judy and I were talking earlier today, and she said it's as though they don't want us to use it anymore because they've taken away all the fun stuff, and it actually crashed on me. So I'm not saying that'll happen to everybody. This is not anti-Skype. It's just that I'm finding that since Microsoft took it over, they've made so many changes that I find it uncomfortable using it, just because I know that it's being used as a tool, a listening tool, and not that Zoom isn't, but it's just that it's a paid service that I use. So I'm just sort of, full disclosure, just letting you know why I use that. The other thing that I like about it is that when you call in with a telephone, it's, for most people, it's not a long distance situation. And sometimes people just want to use their phones. They don't want to use VoIP. By the way, I'm really going to encourage you to listen to the interview that I did with Michael McKibben, he's been on the American Intelligence Media over the past, I guess since November, really. And I managed to have a conversation with him, and I did an interview it's in two parts. I put it up on Mixcloud, and I think I actually have a copy of it, the original one that we streamed on YouTube. But the guy's amazing. He is the one that created social media, the platform, the patent for social media, and it was completely stolen out from under him. I had a slight experience with that myself. I used to have the trademark on Narnia way back, and it was taken out from under me when Walden Media decided that they were going to make movies by the same name. And that was, anyway, that was a whole other story. But I totally relate to the fact that people are getting these trademarks and patents stolen. Well, this was stolen by the deep web, the deep state, I should say. And that's a combination of the dark web and deep state. Anyway, it's being used by DARPA. It's been, Facebook is a tool of the CIA, and what could be better? People will just tell you exactly what they're eating, what they're doing, what their name is, where their phone number is. So that technology that allows people to be connected by VoIP or by Zoom or by Skype or what we're doing right here was created, the code was created by Leader Technologies, and Michael McKibben is the head of Leader. And they started doing this in the 90s. They had a concept, and even IBM could not figure out how to do this, to make information accessible to everybody at the same time. So, a platform that was scalable. And so it seems really easy now looking back, especially if you're younger and you've never not had this technology. But it's pretty amazing. And I remember when Skype first came out, and I first used it in the late 90s. And that was when it was first coming out. And I think that was just their first experimentation to see if they could pick up conversations with people. And it's not paranoid. It's just the way it is. Sorry, folks, but that's the way it is. And I guess when I talked to Catherine Albrecht, who started Spy Chips in 1999, and she's also the person that came up with Start Page. She was talking about these things many, many years ago. She just basically said, if you're using Facebook, if you're using Google, then, you understand that this is the way that it works. And we're basically signing on to that. It's too bad because people like Michael McKibben didn't want it to be that way. But what I'm saying is that I think we all need to become involved at whatever level we can to take back these things, to take back the technologies. It ties in with the free technology that's available to us and that has been used for nefarious purposes. That's why they shut people down on YouTube channels. That's when you get too close to the truth about things like the free technologies. L.A. Marzulli's talking about some of the findings he's had about the Nephilim and the elongated skulls. That's a whole other thing, and I'm going to have him on as well. Again, I've had him on before, and I want to have him on again. But these are all interrelated because they're versions of history that are not as advertised, but they are also dark. The dark stuff has come to the surface and the cream has been pushed to the bottom. And when I interview people like Michael McKibben and L.A. Marzulli, and when we talk to Dr. Judy and all the people that are onto this stuff, you see one thing on George Webb, you see one thing in common is that they're curious. They're not just content, not discontent, to leave things as they are. And they're having these conversations at Christmas dinners, and they're getting, sometimes they lose their friends. People don't want to drive with them because they can't gossip. So you're not going to necessarily have a lot of friends when you're involved in this sort of thing. But I have to say that I did put together a website that I'm working on called Red Pill Square. And I want that to be a place where we can have these kind of conversations with people who want to discuss things in a way that is just putting it out there. We don't have to be right. We don't have to be in control of everything. We don't have to be the ones who have the answer. That's the great thing about community, and what we're trying to do is create community. And I'm trying to do that also on the CharacterDriven site for a different purpose, but it's for people that are listening to the show and aren't necessarily interested in having that conversation yet. But I'm hoping that enough people will go on there in the new form that we can you know, introduce people to new concepts, to rock their worldview. That's the idea there. But Red Pill Square is a place where even if you're wanting to date somebody, I mean, I'm trying to set it up in such a way that it's a social network where it's an alternative to Facebook or any of these other things that could be so cool. And they are cool in a lot of ways. I still go on Facebook and I find out what people are doing, and I think it's great that I can stay in touch with people that I might not otherwise be able to see, or if I don't have time to write cards for birthdays, at least you're checking in and saying I love you, I care about you. And that is the most important thing. And it always comes back to that. We were talking about that today. Dr. Judy was sharing a video with me, and we were talking about animals again. And I think the fascination for both of us is the fact that they do have community, and there's no question about it. When it may be a weird community and it may not be perfect either. And they fight with each other and they do all these things that are not desirable, I suppose. But we do those things too, and we don't have community. And I think that's one of the things that we're looking for. And if I can create a community here online in any possible way, then that's what I'm trying to do. And I'm also trying to bring a different way of looking at what's out there in terms of information and trying to assimilate it together. So I'm hoping that you guys will be part of that, and that you'll maybe enjoy it, hopefully, and that you'll what I meant by maybe was participate in. And so rather than a phone-in show on Skype, I'm going to make it more of a group activity where we can have a chat. Wouldn't it be great just to be able to have you guys on here, and instead of having my face, have your faces, and be able to talk about some of these things that are in the news, and that are being shoved down our throat in a way that is not it's not easy to take when we're surrounded by people who are watching mainstream media. I know I do a lot of just saying, I don't want to get into that right now because I just don't have the time, with people that are, somebody said the other day, they always think it's like a Trump thing or an Obama thing or this. No, it's just look at what's really happening behind the scenes. It's not about this or that. There are people that are doing things for whatever reason that are not okay. And they're ripping us off, and there's a space program that is not as advertised. And I'll say things like, well, tell me about the Van Allen radiation belts. What do you know about that? Nothing. I know nothing about it. And it's frustrating because you can't start to have a conversation with people that have not looked into things. It becomes an argument. What are you saying? We didn't go to the moon? What are you saying? How do they get back to Earth? It's always they jump. It's just like with where did the towers go? They want to jump to who did it, who done it. And, who do you think's behind this? I don't know. I just don't know how we got through the Van Allen radiation belts. I don't know how they used a Hasselblad on the moon. I don't know how they used those spacesuits to walk on the moon. I don't understand. I don't understand why they weren't being hit by meteorites, because von Braun said that was going to be one of the problems when you're up there without any atmosphere to protect you. So all these things that they were talking about in the 50s all of a sudden seem to be resolved by 69. And I want to know how. So one of the things I did was I did an interview with Bart Sabrell. If any of you've seen If Anything Happened on the Way to the Moon, I've been editing together the footage and trying to put it into a context so that if you or anybody else wanted to show the interview to somebody, it would actually show you the footage as well, instead of it just being an interview or talking like this, blah, 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 blah. You see some of the interviews, like the, I just love this. It's hilarious. What's his name? Alan Bean. who went to the moon. Went to the moon? Well, he went to the moon. What can I say? But he did not know that he went through the Van Allen radiation belts. And I just love the interview because in his own words, he just says, well, I guess we did then. If you close your eyes and you think pleasant thoughts, it won't hurt you. The radiation won't hurt you. So think about that next time you go to the dentist. Just say, don't even put that lead thing on me because I'm just going to think pleasant thoughts. And those x-rays aren't going to hurt me at all. The x-rays are such a small fraction of what the Van Allen radiation belts are putting out as far as radiation. And now they found out that there's actually 3. They thought there were just 2 belts around the earth. Now they're finding out there's 3. I wish I had it in front of me here. I should have thought I had. I didn't know I was going to be talking about the Van Allen radiation belts. But what I'm going to do is put together some footage. And what I'm hoping is that we can actually take a look at it in the viewing room here. It'll be live streamed, but there'll be people in the room that we can kind of take a look at it together and then have a discussion about it, because there might be things that you didn't know about, I didn't know about, and that would be really helpful for other people who don't know. Because you get a lot of people that are experts. Have you noticed that? Especially on the alt media? They know about this, they know about that. That's great. And you got to know some stuff. But I think the discussion is interesting too, because there might be other people that have the same question. Or different questions that I hadn't thought about. Like tell me I'm wrong, because I'd like to know. And I've actually looked at some of the videos, taking a look to see if, I kind of want to be wrong, because there's so many weird things about the world that I just want something to be as it looks, and I can just say, oh yeah, that's exactly the way that it's been talked about in the news, and it's exactly what they say. And it's frustrating because people sort of assume that you're going to have a negative attitude about the news. It's not about the news. It's about that doesn't make any sense given the evidence. And this is L.A. Marzulli too. He's another person that I've been in touch with again, and he was on the show before. He's really busy now, but I'd like to have him on to talk about some of these things, the things that he's been finding, the elongated skulls, because people will say, oh, well, that's just what do you call it, cradle boarding. I have to know a little bit about a lot of things, but I have people on so that they can talk about the more in-depth side of things. So I have this curiosity, and I'll have people on and ask them questions, but retention is not my strong suit. So it's great when other people have questions that they can ask, and where we can just sort of have an exchange with people who are finding out things that are totally bizarre, like why, when they find these elongated skulls, why are they being taken by the Smithsonian and hidden in the basement? Or because it'll change history, and if we're invested in history, if we have an investment, just like with Q, if we have an investment in evolution or going to the moon or building 7, it's a very subtle thing, because we think sometimes that we have, because we have an alternate way of looking at things, and we've gone through this process over the past 17 years of going, you know what, building 17 or building 7 fell as well, or fell, they'll say fell, but really what I say is it disappeared. Then you're invested in that just as much as if you said planes smacked into the buildings and that's how they've fell down. They came down, boom, 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 boom. You get, do you see what I'm saying? That you get equally invested in the door number 2 or door number 3 story, to the point where it's very difficult to say, well, maybe what I've been told is a limited hangout as well. Maybe the Q thing is a limited hangout, but it's so much harder to follow someone like George Webb's line of reasoning. I'm not talking about following him. I'm talking about listening to how he's putting together his facts and his ideas, so that he's coming up with a bigger picture. And that's exactly what Dr. Judy does. She puts together these facts, and people don't have the patience. And we don't live in communities where we can have these kind of discussions, like where you can go back to your family and say, I was thinking about this. It's kind of weird because people don't understand even why you care about Hurricane Aaron. What are you saying? What are you saying about Hurricane Aaron? What does that have to do with the price of eggs? It has a lot to do with the price of eggs because honestly, if the hurricane was taken off of the weather map, there has to be a reason for that. And I want to know why. It's always about why. Because, okay, just take a look at that on its very own merits. Okay, you've got this hurricane bearing down. Okay, think what you will. Okay, fine. They didn't mention it. They didn't think it was important enough to tell 38 million people on the eastern seaboard that there was this hurricane coming their way. All right, give you that. Why did they take it off of the weather maps, though? Why not just put it on there and say, or just say, there's heavy weather off the coast or whatever? But they made such a big deal about taking it off of the weather maps on all of the major newscasts. So, and I wrote a paper about this for one of my classes. And it was interesting because I got such bad marks. I actually do pretty well in my classes. And the bad mark didn't bother me so much, but it was just the fact that the guy said, you didn't convince me. I'm not trying to convince you. It was about media and deception in media. And I said it can happen even with the weather. And I gave my evidence. And he was so emotionally wrapped up in the fact that I was saying that there was a hurricane and it wasn't on the weather and he got so tied up in the emotional side of it that he couldn't see that I actually made my point. So what I did is I sent the paper to Dr. Judy and she forwarded it to Eric Larson, Dr. Larson, who does the foreword in Where Do the Towers Go? And not everybody can do that. I mean, I feel very, very privileged to be able to. I was frustrated. It wasn't that I was trying to get validated so much, but I wanted her to see what was happening in the school system, in the education system, because she, of course, is an educator and she's no longer able to work in that field. But I think it was reassuring in a certain way and Eric Larson is also a professor. And he said, as far as the way it was written and everything else, it's a top-notch paper. I would have changed this and I would have changed that. And he made notes in the margins and said, clearly this guy's an idiot. I don't know, something to that effect. But see, here I am saying that we shouldn't do ad hominem comments about people. But it was clear that he was not marking it as a professional, as a person who was looking at it as an academic. He just could not get over the concept that perhaps even the weather isn't as advertised. And that's the part that I was curious about and that I was trying to get across in the paper. So if you could look past whether you thought that was true or not, you were able to get to the meat of the thing. Now, I'm really going on, but this is sort of reminding me of so many different things because I have I'm taking a course in philosophy. It's bioethics. And same kind of thing. I can get myself into trouble in 2 seconds just by asking questions. And again, I'm sure that there's something about the way I'm doing this that's triggering something in people. But we were talking about statistics, and I said, well, even statistics, it aren't evidence because they can be, swayed either way. And I used vaccinations as an example. I wasn't meaning to get into an argument about it, but it was so funny because we'd just been talking about how you can't make assumptions, and sometimes when you come into philosophy you have to really be willing to sort of suspend your beliefs and hear things from a different perspective, or there's things that you might not have thought about. And we'd just been doing a class on this, and this was after the class, and I had stayed behind. at her request because I had missed a class and I was supposed to be catching up. And I had to wait for all these other people, which I thought was kind of weird because I thought we were going to be able to just meet. So I was waiting. And then I chimed in at this point about statistics. And she kind of went nuts after all of this kind of chiding us and explaining to us how we had to keep open. She started in on vaccinations. And I was just using that as an example, that maybe the information has been skewed. Maybe they're not mentioning that there's additives in the vaccines or whatever. They might be questioning things in such a way that, let's say, climate change, like climate changes, but when you say 97% of scientists agree, you know, of the people surveyed, which were a certain group of people, and they're asked a certain question. So it may be true, it may not be true, but I want to see the question and I want to see who you surveyed. I want a list of those people, not, now we are going to add all these other people into the mix. Anyway, I'm probably ticking people off even talking about this here, but the point is that she got very, very triggered, as they say, just by that. And she started saying, well, this person says this, and my ex-husband went up the Himalayas, and, there is climate change. And I said, yeah, but can we agree that the survey itself is what we're talking about here? That sometimes the survey is the problem? And so, I'm sorry, I'm having problems with my other computer. So I'm just going to turn that off. I think I use it too much. And this happened today, actually, with Dr. Judy when I was talking to her. It just kind of died. So anyway, I don't need that one over there. It's just an extra one that I was monitoring the chat with out of the side of my eye. So I've gone on too long. I only meant to come on for a little bit, and I was going to show you a couple of articles. I was going to show you like the Eric. Sorry, I have to look down here. I wanted to just show you something. Oh, okay. So there's one of the places you can go is to aim for truth. What is it? Toothbits. Oh, Toothbits blog. Okay, well, what I was taking a look at is Aim for Truth. Aim, number 4, truth.org. And you know what it is? It's on my other computer. I'll come on and do another show. It's too long anyway. I was going to go over the Eric Schneiderman, the Attorney General of New York, the sleazebag. I'm not supposed to do that. See, I'm breaking my own rules again and again. Anyway, the guy that put himself forward as such an amazing advocate for women and truth and justice and all the rest of it, it turns out that he has been abusing women. So what my point in that conversation was going to be, and I will show you some of the research that I was doing. I wanted to show you some of the tools that I've been using to find out some of the historical stuff between he and Donald Trump, because there's definitely bad blood there. So I guess what was happening was Eric Schneiderman was investigating Trump University, and you may remember that little debacle, which I find interesting because if you look at the Clinton Foundation, and of course we're not going to look at that, but we're going to look at Trump University, which was basically a real estate university, and it was not meant to be doling out degrees and that sort of thing. But it's anyway, he took exception to Trump University, the AG, and he did an investigation. And so apparently there were some things going on with Trump and now I can't remember his name. Schneiderman. There were these things going on a few years ago. So I went to take a look at some of the links that were not working, and then they went to these dead sites. And so, but then I was able to do my secret little investigating trick, and I was able to find some of the stuff. It was amazing because Trump was on to the guy years ago. It's always, it's like the Trump effect. It's, think what you will of the guy, but he's he's a winner. He seems to be on to people for whatever reason before any of us ever figure it out. So I'm just saying he's probably not someone you'd want to cross if you were in business with him. And yeah, he's probably had to do some pretty I'm not going to say shady deals, but he's had to deal with some shady people if he's doing real estate in New York. He's also probably, I mean, he's had a very colorful life. And the issue, I guess, for me is all of them have. And why haven't we been bringing other people like Bill? As far as I'm concerned, Bill Clinton was a rapist, and we didn't bring him to task. And yet we are looking at relationships with adults that seem to be consensual. And mind you, it could have been while Trump was married. The point is, he was elected with all of that in mind. Nobody thought that he was a Boy Scout, or if he was a Boy Scout, he definitely changed from that to being not such a Boy Scout. But I think that's also the reason that he's able to come up with negotiations that are incredibly successful. He knows how to negotiate. He knows how to, he doesn't do the BS. And that's the thing I like, that's so refreshing. I just see so much BS in the world, and it's really nice to be able to see people that just call a spade and just speak their mind. So, gosh darn, that's a whole other issue, and I could probably get myself into a lot of trouble. I'm not talking about Trump per se. I'm just talking about the Trump syndrome. And, again, I don't think it's okay to get behind any one thing. All of us are fallible, and I think it's ridiculous to suggest that, we're going to get behind a person because you're going to be disappointed no matter what, unless you go into it knowing that the person that you're behind is going to disappoint you from time to time. And you got to have a pretty okay, look, I was married to someone for 23 years and I didn't know who they were. So maybe they were that way all the time and I just was blind, but we never really can. We don't even know who we are. So I think all we can do is look at the fruits of our character and see if what we say we believe is what we actually believe, even if it's not what you believe, even if it's different from what you have said. Now, maybe you would be in that car driving along and you would have embarked in a conversation, thought it was perfectly harmless and fun. And that's totally legitimate. I'm not making a judgment about that. I just don't find it interesting, especially if it's somebody that I don't even know. And it's just gossip. I'm not interested. But that doesn't mean to say that it's not interesting. Sometimes I'm sure that I've engaged in gossip and found it highly amusing. But it's about putting forth something. So when I say this and I put my stake in the ground and I say, this is what I'm trying to do in my life, and you notice that I'm not living up to my potential, then I see it as being a growing process when, I'm able to hear back, just as George does, and other people that are really looking for the truth. And that includes the truth within us, the truth that we can't see because we're so busy looking at things outside of ourselves that we can't sometimes see that we are stepping on our own truth, that whatever we've put forward as being our standard, we're not bearing our standard. We're not holding our banner high. And it's important to have community to be able to check each other in that. So that's kind of what I want to do here. That's basically what I wanted to say, is that I think that it's a really great thing to come together, and if we don't have time to be assimilating all the information that we need to, if we've been reading Where Did the Towers Go, and Dr. Judy is busy doing something else, then it's a great stepping stone toward being able to help other people to get into a community where we can share ideas and learn and have these resources like the ones I'm trying to put together. And I'm hoping that you'll tell me if there's something that will be helpful for you, where you can give it to somebody who needs to know just a little bit. We don't need to shove the whole ball of wax down people's throats. We need to just give them enough to make them question. And I think that's the best place to be at, whether we have been doing this for decades or whether we're just new to the idea that the world is not as it seems. I think the idea that we're constantly questioning is a good thing. And it's great to come to a place of saying, yeah, I can hang on to that evidence and really believe it. And that's something that has really resonated for me, because I know for everybody it's different. When I was talking to Bart Sabrell, he was saying that for some people it's the fact that they've lost all the technology and can't go back to the moon that makes people think things are not as they should be. And that was something that I told to a friend of mine the other day, and I just played just a little clip of gosh, I'm forgetting people's names, but anyway, representative from NASA, anyway, he was no slouch, and he was saying, well, we just lost the technology. He's a spokesperson for NASA. He's not just a guy that hangs out and makes comments off the cuff. He was speaking on behalf of NASA. Well, it would just be too hard to put the technology together again because we lost it all. Anyway, that made my friend laugh, and sometimes that's the best way to do it, is just to put something humorous on and let people watch it for themselves. So I guess this wouldn't be an example of that, but I'm hoping that you'll go take a look at George. I hope you're reading Where Did the Towers Go? And I do want to warn you that I am going to be coming on a little bit more regularly, and I'm hoping to build a community here where people will be participating in the conversation, and we can work through some of the news stories, some of the questions, try to put things together in such a way that when people come to this channel, they can have an interactive experience, in the sense that we're not just talking about Q, we're not just talking about the Iranian deal, we're not just talking about the Clinton Foundation. We're taking all of these things and we're sort of putting them together so that we can see that there are areas of interest that we might want to pursue, and that, even if we want to create media, I would love to be able to do that with various other people and help you guys with what I know. And I'd love to be able to do some broadcasting. If anybody has any ideas for shows, I'm happy to have guests on, or to have you on and to talk to you about things. So it's developing. I'm trying to spend more time on the media side of things and make it more interesting. And I just wanted to touch base with you because I was kind of missing you after a couple of weeks of not seeing you. So that is the show. I'm going to line up the extra, which is actually the intro as well, just so that I have a chance to clean things up here a little bit and have a proper ending, because we have to do things properly here. And I just want to say happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there, and to anybody who is looking after people, caregivers, everybody who's acting as a mom in their own special way. Have a great day and really enjoy the rest of your weekend. And if you're working, enjoy your days off whenever they are. Enjoy your family, hug people, tell them that you love them, and try to be kind to one another, even though we don't always see eye to eye. Thanks so much for being with me. And yeah, it really brightens my day to do this show. So thanks so much. And we'll see you soon.